This tutorial is dedicated to helping new, inexperienced, or otherwise struggling players learn how to psychologically approach the start of their campaigns. Noteworthy timestamps are in the video description. Often, how much you struggle in the late game is based on how your early game goes, so having a game plan is critical to success. If you haphazardly spend skill points or research tech with no clear path, one failure could cost you dozens of turns worth of built-up momentum. I'm not interested in giving you the most optimal strategy. There are many different play styles that can succeed in a legendary campaign, so consider what I show you today merely as one example among many. If I focus on ranged and you want to go cavalry, you go right ahead. It's completely viable. If you're playing the game unmodded, this tutorial will still work for you, because what's important is the critical thinking process, and that is what I endeavor to demonstrate in this video. For the sake of my own sanity, I have several mods installed due to being absolutely burned out on the base game. Modders, you f***ing rock. You deserve a share of the profits the publisher and developer make because you are undoubtedly responsible for at least a portion of this game's success. If you want to view or adopt my mod collection, link is also in the video description. Without further ado, here is my process. For this demonstration, we will use Karl Franz of the Empire. My settings are Mortal Empires, Legendary Campaign difficulty, and Very Hard Battles. Each starting lord has its own unique faction and army bonuses. It helps to know your strengths before even loading the map. Karl's faction gets plus 20 diplomacy with Empire sub-factions, making it easier to acquire pacts, trade agreements, and confederations. This is useful because of his victory conditions, which we will cover momentarily. Plus 4 levels to new lord recruits. New armies will start stronger as a result. Plus 10 melee attack to Reichsguard units, making this class of elite Empire troops even more imposing. Minus 10% upkeep to all standard Empire infantry, making his early game armies even more cost effective, and begins with an elite lineup in his army. Karl's army gets plus 3 public order to the local province, which helps in stabilizing friendly territory, plus 5 leadership to improve his whole army's morale, and an impressive 25% recruitment discount for all new recruits under his command. An important footnote: percent modifiers are more valuable on larger base numbers. 25% recruitment discount on a 100 gold unit is 25 gold saved. 25% recruitment discount on a 400 gold unit is 100 gold saved. The more expensive the unit, the more money saved. This does not necessarily mean you should rush tech. It's just something to consider when cost effectiveness is in question. Ultimately, money saved at any value is a good thing. In summary, Karl is a good diplomat, lord and unit recruiter, has stronger attacks on an elite guard, better upkeep on his early unit roster, with bonus units to initiate his campaign with. Additionally, he can muster his own forces cheaper and at a higher morale, while also being able to secure public order faster than most. Getting through any game is, at its simplest, problem solving. To solve a problem, you must recognize it, resolve it, and execute it. Our problem is the victory conditions. To resolve it, we must at least acquire 13 specific provinces, 8 landmarks, and defeat 2 specific factions. Everything you do from this point on will be the execution of this resolution. From these requirements, you can infer what kind of enemies you'll be facing. This part of the world has a plethora of factions you will come into contact with, but these objectives will put you in most direct contact with humans, undead, and chaos. Now that we can see the staircase, we have to clear the first step. Take a look at your diplomacy tab and notice who your active or potential enemies and allies are. In my example, I'm at war with human rebels, an orc incursion, and roaming beastmen. I have no intel on the location of the beastmen, but I notice the human rebels own the rest of my province. There are also 2 spots of diplomatic red in the nearby fog of war. It's safe to assume those are the greenskins, since the secessionists own 4 settlements and they're all within my sight. In conclusion to this observation, I will prepare to counter humans first. Now let's take a look at friendlies. Most of the provinces required for victory are possessed by humans who are by and large friendly. They don't all get along with one another though, so navigating this environment can be tricky if you're not careful. Being cooperative with one may piss off another. It's also important to consider that not all of them will survive long enough to be confederated. Unless you have more experience and confidence, or you just want to try something crazy, I recommend you focus on playing nice with larger electors that you share a border with. If you make an ally out of your neighbor, he or she will act as a military buffer to shared enemies. Enemies not already at war with your ally may trespass across your ally's territory, which will make it easier to get your allies to join that war. Neighboring allies will also be able to trade over land routes so that neither of you requires a dock to increase one another's income. Lastly, should you inevitably want to confederate anyone, taking territory adjacent to your existing border is easier to secure and maintain when it's within spitting distance. If you confederate factions that aren't next door, they will be harder to reinforce. Should you need to send reinforcements to provinces abroad, you would have to consider longer travel time and, possibly, trespassing penalties if you're lacking military access pacts with interposing factions. In conclusion to these observations, I will consider friendships with Middenland and Talabecland first, and other available alliances second. In summary, prepare for existing enemies and potential allies by proximity. Elector counts. Elector counts is an Empire-specific faction mechanic that acts as an extension of the Diplomacy tab. This mechanic could be an entire video on its own. In order to stay on topic and succinct, I recommend you read the tooltips carefully for yourself, which can be found by mousing over the relevant material. All I want to highlight from this section is how I revise my situation in conjunction with my diplomacy analysis. I need 10 fealty to either trigger a confederation or gain a point of authority. The factions closest to this threshold from the start are Talabecland and Sullen. If I were to confederate Talabecland in its present state, I would gain 4 adjacent settlements and whatever standard forces he has. In Sullen's case, I would have 2 settlements and a fort separated by the 3 regions of Wissenland, which economically is undoubtedly weaker. But I would get legendary Lord Balthazar Gelt. In all likelihood, by the time I garnish the 3 fealty for either of them, their borders may change, but that's irrelevant. This choice is to highlight the notion that there is no right answer, it's up to personal preference. For this demonstration, I will play nice with both of them, because neither of them will hurt my chances with the other. Typically, this early in the game, you're not going to be making much money, and therefore will be limited in what you can invest in. Investments can be on a spectrum of choices, but optimizations lay in infrastructure or military. Altdorf, my faction capital and starting settlement, is lucrative beyond measure, but also possesses some tempting military technology. Despite having a high maximum of building slots, it's got a limit nonetheless, and I have to choose which structures and their corresponding benefits I want to invest in, even if I don't intend on building right away, because these choices may influence how I build my starting army. Once again, I could dedicate an entire video on analyzing this Landmarks Variety Pack, but for the sake of giving you a concise tutorial, I will opt to go for military investments first. To reassure you that this isn't just a lazy cop-out, let me explain to you why pouring your investment into your military first is a good strategy. Investing in your military early could mean upgrading your barracks to have access to better units, recruiting more of your available recruits, using agent actions against enemy assets, etc. How does this pay off? For starters, if you have a bigger stick, you're more likely to win. If you win, you gain experience, therefore levels, therefore skill points, therefore stats. Summarily, your surviving characters and units get stronger for the long term. Furthermore, you weaken the enemy's strength, stacking your advantage against their forces if you win by a wide enough margin. If you keep your momentum going, you can use that disparity in strength that you created by kicking the enemy's ass to gain territory. That territory's income will not only be stripped from your enemy's profits, but it will then be added to yours. Imagine if a settlement is making the rebel faction 100 gold. You occupy it. Now the AI has lost 100 gold, and you've gained 100 gold. This exchange of control creates a 200 gold disparity in income between the warring parties. Though this may not sound like much on its own, pennies add up to dollars. In conclusion, if you build yourself a full stack and rampage as an unstoppable force, Though you may not have increased your economy by investing in your own infrastructure, you have made money from successful combat and territorial expansion, not to mention immediately made progress on your ultimate victory conditions. Once you've successfully consolidated the province from the opposition, you would then have even more territory to invest in economically, increasing your maximum potential income. So we've decided to go military first. Let's take a look at our technology. Again, there are many different paths that can lead to victory, but for this demonstration we'll stick to the left branches for military improvements to get that snowball going early. The first tech takes 10 turns to research, and I can conquer Reichland in 6 or 7. So I'll research for the army I'm going to want, not the one I need now. In this case, I'm going to choose ranged upgrades because I can get the ranged advantage over the inevitable melee-centric armies of undead and chaos. I know that I can make friends out of other ranged rosters, so I don't have to worry about countering them on the battlefield. Now, this is where you might be tempted to begin recruiting those military investments we've been so focused on, but there seems to be something on your screen. Might want to wipe that shit off. We'll have time to recruit this turn, after we deal with these treasonous sprites.